Hey there YouTube, welcome back to another video. A black powder update as usual. Now this update is coming quite a bit later than I really wanted it to. I had a little bit of a chaotic week last week. Not obviously the Queen's funeral took a large chunk out of the Monday. I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched a lot of it. And of course it was so late into the afternoon. Well, I suppose it wasn't that late into the afternoon, but it was already well into the afternoon by the time I decided to do some painting. And I always start with my grenadiers and voltigeurs. So you're talking sort of 8 figures, and for some reason they really took me a long time. They took me like a day or two extra than they should have. And there's no real reason for it. Perhaps it's because the Perrys are just that slightly smaller. It was taking a lot more time to do the strapping and the details on them. It was just sort of toying at my patience a little bit. And of course that just put everything a day or two behind, and ended up being 3 days late. So I think what I'll probably do is I might possibly, still got the colonel to do for this regiment, but I also at the same time I like to sort of paint command figures, especially mounted ones, in sort of packs of 2 if possible, because just painting one takes more or less the same time as painting 2, because obviously you can work on one while one's drying. So I might possibly do a couple of command figures, perhaps for this regiment and the next, the colonel figures, and that'll just help me, that'll take up the extra time of the week, that'll kind of put me back on schedule so that I can start my next battalion. I could probably start them before the start of next week. Maybe I could easily finish two guys before Saturday. So I could perhaps even start my next battalion on Saturday, and that would get me back on schedule, so I might possibly do that. However, I did manage to obviously finish a battalion more or less on time, so let's go into it and I'll show you what I've painted. So let's just get a little bit of a zoom in. So these chaps are the 3rd Battalion of the 2nd Nassau, the St John. These chaps are what I kind of call them 50-50 battalions, because generally you have whenever you buy an elite box you always get leftover figures, and I always, as a good way of sort of making extra battalion very cheap, basically make a half and half battalion using as many of the elite figures as I've got left, and then adding the necessary Perrys, therefore making up a cheaper battalion with the figures that you've already got in hand. Now the trouble with these guys is, because they've got the separate grenadiers and voltigeurs, and normally with elite you do normally get like 4 extra, you normally get sort of 2 of each left over. Sometimes yeah, it's generally about 2 extra of each type. In this particular battalion you didn't. You actually didn't get any extra grenadiers or voltigeurs. So I did actually have to buy a box of each of those. And then I had to buy a box of normal fusilier because there wasn't quite enough elite. And then obviously a command pack. So normally, you're still saving money because you're only buying 4 boxes as opposed to 6. But generally, you can normally get away with buying 3 boxes, and of course that makes it a particularly cheap battalion. But I just loved the elite, the Perry's figure so much that I actually favoured using those over the elites, and therefore it's a lot more Perry's orientated than elite. in this particular regiment. And like I say, when you get a closer look at them, you'll see what I'm talking about. They really are very nice figures. And let's get going. So, Grenadier Company. So let's bring them in. So these chaps obviously are all Perrys. You can see what I was talking about. They're really nice figures. They just so happen that they're actually in the same position as the elite. So that, you know, is a perfect sort of match. This sort of advancing position. Obviously, like I said, there were no extra Grenadiers, so these guys are all Perrys. But yeah, really nice group of troops there. And of course, I love the way they've got their long coats over their shoulders to give them some extra sabre protection if they're attacked by cavalry. And of course, also the fact that they've got their Grenadier badges on their cartridge boxes. So that is the Grenadier Regiment. And of course, also they have the bread bags. So I gave them the khaki colour ones because I think that they would have chosen that colour over as opposed to the white ones that were available. So next up we'll go for the 4th Company, the black pom-poms. Now this group has got 2 elite on. You can see what I was saying, that the elite and the Perrys are very, very similar. I'd say they're probably like maybe 98% fully compatible. The same size, they're practically the same thickness. The muskets are the same sizes. Only difference being is that these chaps have the French muskets, and these guys have got the more sort of Brown Bess, or what I think are Brown Bess style muskets. But yeah, really nice figures, and I think the elite guys go in with them really well. So that is the 4th Company with the black pom-poms. Voltigeurs next, and again obviously all Perrys because there were no elite for these chaps. Yeah, again nothing to complain about. Really nice. They've also have their long coats around their waists, or around their shoulders rather, and yeah, really nice figures. So there's the Voltigeur. Next up we'll go for the NCO stand. A little bit out of order. Normally I go for the musician stand next, but we'll go for these chaps. So here we have 3 Perrys and 1 elite. We have the sergeant from the command pack, and we have 2 normal Perry Fusiliers, and of course a elite miniature as well. And yeah, really nice. Again, really nice figures from Perrys. Love the sergeant. And of course they have the blue pom-poms. And also, obviously, you can see that these chaps have got the uncovered shakos as opposed to the elite ones that had the covered. So you can get to see the orange cockade, which is very cool. So that is the NCO stand. Now we'll go for the musician stand. So on this base we have again 3 Perrys and 1 elite. Actually no, I think they're all Perrys on here again. So yeah, so all Perrys. This guy here, the guy with the headband, came in the command pack. I'm not really too sure what he's supposed to represent. Maybe he's supposed to represent another NCO, but there's nothing. There's no sculpted NCO stripes on him. Maybe it's just like, you know, they couldn't think of a figure to sort of put in, so they just put a unique headed Fusilier figure in. We have a slightly different uniform drummer. I think this drummer is British equipment based rather than French equipment based. Only difference being that he has got the French backpack and the French style water bottle and bread bag. And possibly, like I say, I think this sort of cover underneath his drum is more in the British style, and also the sleeving is only half arm and not full arm. So I don't know. I mean, but he's certainly a slightly different style uniformed drummer. And of course, this guy here, he is actually pretty cool. I gave him a black sort of bandage around his head. Maybe maybe he got some sort of flesh wound or some sort of small cut on his head. And he just basically tied a black handkerchief around his head, or a piece of black cloth, and maybe he got sort of flesh wound, tore through his shako, destroying it more or less, and therefore he had to ditch it, and he's just wearing the black headband. But I think he looks pretty cool in there with the drummer's stand. And finally, we have the command. Now, historically, from what I've read, and obviously there is no real hardcore evidence whether any of the sort of Netherlands Division war actually used flags. However, there is a little bit of evidence that the Nassau did, particularly this regiment, the second, and it was sort of documented that they had three. Obviously, they've got the 3 battalions, but only 2 of them were carrying colours, with the third just carrying a bare pole, a battered bare pole, without the flag. Now, obviously, I did think about whether to replicate that, but I thought in the end, well, I've got the flags. I'm not going to waste them, and they are such beautiful flags, GMB. That I am actually going to make the decision to give them a flag. At the end of the day, it's my interpretation of them, and you could theoretically moan about that, but at the end of the day, everything else about them is correct. So I think that's my prerogative. And of course, the other slightly odd thing is that the commanding officer is actually a grenadier officer. Now, I did contemplate not using him. I thought, well, perhaps I could just put the officer in the grenadier company, and come up with some other officer to use. But in the end, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to make him like the sort of commanding officer who was a grenadier before he was given the command of the battalion, and he just made appropriate regulatory changes to his headwear to allow him to continue wearing the cold pack. So maybe that's an officer obviously has gold lacing rather than red, and the only real difference he decided to change was the pom-pom colour, but he has retained the red sack of the cold pack, just to preserve his grenadier roots, as to say. Now, obviously, this is not historically accurate in any way, but I think it's quite a good backstory as to why they'd have a grenadier in command. And of course, with him being a major, I sculpted an extra pauldron for him. I actually got some new putty in. Now, I couldn't find a decent sized Vallejo plastic putty. I could only find like the normal sort of paint pot style. I couldn't find any sort of bigger tubes, which is a little strange. I don't know whether they're redesigning it or something, because I've got to admit the tube that I'm using at the moment is kind of it's not dry, but it's not functioning as it should. So I ended up getting some AK modelling putty. Now this is really designed more for filling gaps and things like that, but I did manage to I think do a fairly decent job at sculpting a shoulder pauldron. So yeah, I'm really happy with him. And of course we have the senior NCO being the elite guy, and of course the junior officer here. All 3 of these Perry's guys came in the command pack, and and of course they have the usual regulation Nassau officers uniform. Now I did actually decide to give the I did actually spot on the St Jerome site that they gave one of their officers a regular white band sword. Now this could be British issued, because obviously they did use standard British infantry swords, and I thought that would be quite a cool little addition. You know, perhaps because of the 3rd Regiment they need to have a lot more new recruits, and therefore you know, maybe they couldn't supply everything that a particular battalion needed from their own supplies. So obviously the Dutch that have their stores brimming with lots of British equipment gave him a sort of regular infantry British standard infantry sword. So I left it as the sort of the black leather scabbard. Now obviously the Colonel has got a more of a cavalry style sabre, so he has the silver style scabbard, and I also left the Captain's scabbard as black leather too. So perhaps he also has a British style sword, but retained his leather scabbard holder for it. So there's the command. Yeah, really, again, beautiful figures from Perry's, and you know, the elite guy is a great position for an NCO. So that is it. That's the end of this particular look at the 3rd Battalion. Now, as I said, I do actually just have the Colonel to do for these boys, and then they're properly finished. Next up will be the 28th, 2 battalions of the 28th. Now, of course, these guys are the orange Nassau, so they are dressed more or less as the same as a Dutch line infantry. They're basically the blue with sort of a poppy red on their facings. Major difference being, of course, that they have the French style shako. Now this is, like I say, a regiment that I've had to build up using entirely Perry's figures for, because I couldn't find any other companies that produce them in 28mm. But I think I've made a few sort of changes that will help them stick out. So hopefully they'll be different enough for my tastes. So yeah, that's the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free to like and comment, and you know, if you're new to the channel and you like the content, and of course I have got a plethora of videos in my on my channel list. I'm sure you can find something that will interest you. Obviously there's a lot of Napoleonic stuff, but you know, back in the day, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, I was heavily into sort of part action and stuff like that, and also lots of other things too. Yeah, think about hitting that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. So yeah, big thank you to everyone as usual, and catch you all in the next one. Bye bye.